Everything felt eerily quiet despite the once bustling streets. The town was empty of tourists, the bars were closed, and the houses were isolated. As we cruised through the darkened roads, we never expected to stumble upon that abandoned restaurant, or the man who would tell us a story we weren't sure we could believe. The night was warm and tropical, with a refreshing breeze blowing in from the sea, moving the curtains of the open windows in the small coastal town of Koh Lanta, Thailand. The streets were usually bustling with tourists, cheap bars, and street vendors, but this night was different. It was during the peak of the COVID pandemic. There were no tourists, the bars were closed, and the locals were isolated in their homes. My friend Karim and I were riding our scooters, searching for a small restaurant that might defy the curfew and serve a late meal. After a moment, an elderly man emerged from the back of the house. He was in his late 60s, his protruding belly pressing against his worn inner shirt, his white hair tangled in an unintended mess. He looked cheerful, but there was a cold blue in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. "Are you still serving food?" I asked. He smiled and, with a distinct British accent, replied, "Of course. Have a seat." He pulled out the chairs himself, and we sat down. Moments later, he returned with an old tablecloth and a menu, standing over us as we browsed. He offered recommendations, and we ordered some traditional dishes. He was very kind, perhaps overly so. He wasn't just a host, but seemed to desperately need company. After taking our order, he sat in front of us, placing his chair at a close distance. He lit a cigarette and began talking non-stop about life on the island, the days of tourists, his favorite dishes, as though he was trying to keep us there as long as possible. After a while, a plump Thai woman came out carrying the food. She placed the dishes in front of us and exchanged some sarcastic remarks with the man before returning inside. The food was disturbingly delicious, as if there was a hidden touch we had never tasted before. "Is she your wife?" I asked him. He smiled, but his smile was somewhat strange. "Yes, my girlfriend, actually. We've been living here together for years." It was clear that he wanted to tell his story. We didn't even have to ask. He started talking about his life in England, his first marriage, and how his children had cut ties with him after he ran off to Thailand with a girl he thought was the love of his life. He told us how he lost all his money on her, and later discovered that she never loved him. She had been using him all along. "But it's okay," he said, taking a long sip of beer. "Because I found Sao. She really cares about me." We looked at the house, but the woman never reappeared. Maybe she had gone back to the kitchen, or maybe she was never there at all. I felt something uncomfortable creeping inside me, but I ignored it. After dinner, we decided to leave. The man offered for us to pay later if we didn't have any money, but we insisted on paying immediately. I took out my wallet, and while searching for the money, I noticed something strange near the door. On the wall, there was a broken frame with an old picture of a man who looked exactly like him, but with another woman. "Is this Sao?" I asked, pointing to the picture. He stopped for a moment, then looked at the picture as if he had never seen it before. He seemed to be trying to remember something, then said with a faint smile, "Ah, no, that's my ex-wife." Karim quickly looked at me. This didn't make sense. The man had said he was only married once, and his wife left him in England. So who was this woman? We didn't want to embarrass him, so we thanked him and left. As we rode away on our bikes, I looked back. The candles on the tables were still lighting the yard, but the man was gone. There was no one there. The next night, we decided to return to the restaurant. But when we reached the same alley, we found nothing. No tables, no menu board, no open gate. Just a small abandoned house with its doors locked and barred. We knocked on the door, but there was no answer. We asked an elderly man who lived nearby about the restaurant and its owner. He stared at us for a moment, then quietly said, "This place has been closed for years. The man who used to run it died at the beginning of the pandemic. He didn't have a wife. He lived alone."